So I recently watched this channel. I watched a couple of videos from this channel called Based Zeus. And the only reason why I discovered this channel is that it has a few different videos with the word vegan in the title. I'm vegan. My YouTube channel is about veganism. I talk with and about other vegans, so I was interested in that. And this guy, Based Zeus, most of his channel is offering advice to young men. I can't imagine older men watching his content. I think it's really clear. I think it's targeting virgins. I think it's targeting guys who've never had sex at all, in terms of the couple of videos I saw. Maybe there are some videos that are for an older, more sophisticated audience. I don't know. Anyway, and nothing wrong with that. No shade. I mean, somebody's got to reach out to that public. For sure, there must be younger guys and inexperienced guys that are getting on YouTube wanting to find out how to make their love life work and how to communicate with women, and these are the kind of answers they're finding. Now, I'm not offended by what Besu says. I'm not horrified by it. I'm not religious. I'm not conservative. It just seems to me like absolutely terrible advice. And it makes me reflect on the different men I've known personally who lived by very different codes, by very different sets of rules, who, pursued women in very different ways and ended up with very different fates. The word misogynist gets thrown around a lot, and most of the time it's the wrong word to use. I mean, technically, a misogynist is a man who hates women.
Yep.
Most of the time, people use the word, what they really mean is a man who blames women for their problems in a way that's irrational or unfair. They don't really mean hatred. A lot of men put themselves in a position where they're affirming their own low expectations again and again. So, I'll break down what I mean here. A man who goes out and hits on 100 women in a weekend, complete strangers, nothing in common, no common interest, not even asking about common interest, who's basically going to bars full of hoe bags and hitting on hoe bags as hoe bags, right? No common interests, and not looking for anything but a one-night stand, okay? It's very easy for men who live that way to start to affirm their perception of the reality that all women are fill in the blank, that all women are just looking for fill in the blank, that all women just respond to fill in the blank. Because they're living with tunnel vision. They're focused on this one method of meeting and interacting with women, and most of their time is being spent on the minority within a minority of women who are in that scenario to begin with and who respond positively to that man hitting on them that way, right? So, I mean, this is like a really small, funny example, but we were walking down the street the other day, and we're in the south of France. I know you guys can see my inflatable inflatable dolphin in the background. We're here on the beach in the south of France, and there are guys here rolling around in Lamborghinis and Ferraris, Porsches, expensive cars. And I thought, wow, isn't it funny how the world's changed? There was a time a few decades ago when a man would meet a woman, and maybe his expensive car would be the first thing she'd see about him, the first thing she'd know about him. And today, all that's been destroyed by the internet. Because I think for most people, meeting a partner, they would first, well, okay, maybe you know them through work, maybe you know them through a friend of a friend, maybe you know by meeting in a coffee shop. But for a lot of us, you learn something about that person through YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. What's the job website where you post your resume?
Indeed.
Oh, Indeed. Okay, there are a bunch of different websites. Whatever it is, you know somebody through their publications. They've written articles that you've read.
LinkedIn, I think.
LinkedIn, I was thinking, but whatever. You know them through some kind of networking website, and then you get to, or even if you met them in person by chance at a party, after you met them, you go home and you Google them, and you learn more about them. Maybe the initial meeting isn't online, but you follow up that way. So, like, these days, with the natural flow of a relationship, it would be at step 5 or 6 that you happen to see the guy's car, and then you're like, "What? You drive a Ferrari? I didn't think you were that kind of guy." You know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't be the first thing leading in. If you're doing what Based Zeus is telling you to do, and basically doing walk-ups on hoe bags where you got nothing in common, you're not looking for anything in common, at the gym, at the nightclub, etc., etc. I'm not going to tell you it won't work. It gets results, but you got to really think about what are those results and the way in which you're already excluding the possibility of having a meaningful relationship, excluding the possibility of connecting with a member of the opposite sex on the basis of stuff you've really got in common. The formula he sets out, even if you did have something in common with this woman, you wouldn't know it. And to me, the most mind blowing thing, because he's giving this advice to younger men a totally broad, non-specific basis. It's not like my channel, me talking to my specialized audience. It's a different kind of advice. And the main thing he says again and again to these guys is just talk about whatever's on your mind. Just talk about whatever you find interesting. That's like, so these guys, they're going to roll up on a hoe bag at the gym and start talking about Minecraft, start talking about Total War 6, start talking about PlayStation Vita, the PlayStation Vita versus Nintendo NX or whatever. Like, really think about, going to start talking about, I don't know, baseball, football, whatever. It's absolutely terrible advice. And this is making assumptions about the audience that are reasonable to make. Probably a lot of guys watching these videos aren't and stuff. But let's say it's me. What do you think? Let's say there's a good-looking woman at the gym. You think I'm going to walk up to her and be like, Laos is a small country, but it has about 48 languages. There are these ethnic minorities in northern Laos, and a lot of them are in tribal groups. But it's fascinating because, not all tribal groups are indigenous, and not all indigenous groups are tribal. So there are some tribes that were migrated from elsewhere, and there's some indigenous groups who don't live in tribal conditions, and they have all these different... It's a really interesting area of research. Random woman I'm approaching just on the basis of her appearance at the gym or at the nightclub or something. That's something interesting to me. And don't get me wrong, that absolutely can get me laid. I think it has gotten me laid. The stuff I'm interested in terms of research, reading, writing, written articles about. But I'm going to meet a woman who values that about me because she's read my article or she's seen me on YouTube. We've listed all these different things. Or meet at a conference. That's another big thing. As soon as you've got an area of specialized interest, whether it's, Laotian ethnic minority linguistics or some kind of charity work. Charity work's a great way to meet women. Doesn't even matter what kind of charity work it is. You could literally, go out and hand out bottles of whiskey to the homeless. And, you'd meet other women doing charity work and, you can hand out sacks of rice to starving people. If that's your interest, if you develop any specialized, interest like that, doesn't have to be research, doesn't have to be intellectual, and then you meet the other women who are also doing that. And let me be clear. So to give an example, if you started studying a language like Korean, my point is not that you would do that in order to meet Korean women. My point is, if you're a white man, you can meet other white people who are studying that language who have common interests. That's what's really powerful. Not saying anything against. You can learn Korean and find a Korean girlfriend, of course. But in terms of what I'm talking about is you have an interest and you meet other people pursuing that same interest. You know what I'm saying? Likewise, with the charity work, I'm not saying you hand out sacks of rice to starving people and then you start dating the starving people you're handing sacks of rice to. No, I'm saying you meet other people who are in that line of work, who are volunteering for charity work, who have those common interests, whatever it is, to make the world a better place, to do something meaningful. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be Xbox, guys. It's not going to be PlayStation 4. That's no. And if it is... No, but if it is, yeah. What does that say about you and how worthless is your whole life and what path does that take you down? So what? You're the guy who wait. So then you're the guy who's cruising PlayStation 4 hoe bags. That's the guy. Yeah. That's the guy you become. You become the guy who dates the PS4 girls. Really? It's the same. But like
met with someone who met their husband at a couch surfing meetup.
But to me that's totally different. Oh, okay. To me, that's totally different. That's not PlayStation. It could
be an Xbox meetup. No.
Okay, so okay. So I agree to some extent. I agree if you're a programmer, if you're an illustrator, if you're part of making video games, or you're part of marketing video games. If you're doing something productive, yes, then maybe you're going to meet a woman who's also in that lane. Sure, but as a consumer, I would say no. Okay. I would say no.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
I've met a friend that met a boyfriend on World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
And I think you might have told me once about a woman that you knew who met somebody on World of Warcraft. Maybe not. Maybe she didn't meet anybody. That was your point. That was the point of your story. I think you met her in Vancouver or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, you can cut.
Look, no. Look, in this world, nothing is impossible. There are exceptions to every rule. These generalizations.
Yeah.
I find the generalizations offered by based Zeus shockingly bad advice for exactly his audience. These young men telling them, talk to complete strangers you have nothing in common with. Just talk about whatever's on your mind. Talk about whatever's interesting to you. I think this is an absolutely terrible approach. And it's also passive, because if you're talking to young men, I don't know how young, but we're talking like 13 to 23, I think, here. Like maximum age 20. It's hard to imagine a 25-year-old guy sitting down and taking this advice, but we're really talking to virgins. I think you also got to say to these kids, you got to step up and develop your interests. You have to have the specialized interests that are going to create meaningful relationships in your life. And meaningful relationships with women are only one type of meaningful relationship.
Mm-hmm.
What is the kind of work, whether it's a hobby or a passion or charity work, that's going to give you meaningful colleagues and contemporaries, and it's going to lead to those kinds of meaningful relationships? And then you will get laid, and you'll get laid in a meaningful way. And some of it could be a one-night stand. I'm not saying all your relationships are going to be long-term. I'm not saying that either. Like you're involved with charity work or linguistics research or something meaningful, something you're passionate about, something, or even, business interests, right? And you meet another woman who shares that interest with you, and she's catching your vibe and you're catching hers. Maybe it is a one-night stand. Maybe it doesn't go anywhere past that. Maybe that's warm and meaningful and memorable for you for the rest of your life, that one night when you met with that person. But obviously, when you're meeting people on the basis of really meaningful common interests, at least the door is open to the possibility of long-term relationships. And again, if you're putting yourself in that scenario, because again, there's nothing wrong with the gym. But let's say you're a guy who just works the gym. Why are you even assuming these girls are single? What percentage of good-looking women you hit on at the gym are really single? And then if they're not single, if they have a boyfriend and they go home with you for a one-night stand anyway, who are you and who do you become? And that self-selecting minority of women, that category you're working without even realizing it, by putting yourself in that situation, by working that angle, which is what based Zeus and some of the other pickup artists, put out for you. Yeah, I mean, that exists, Mm-hmm. I'm not even here to judge. I'm just here to say, like, as a young man, I think a young man might not realize what a bad choice that is, because every step of that path is clearly and explicitly linked to sex. Whereas the kind of path I'm discussing, which is basically pick almost any meaningful interest and work on that. Like, you know what I mean? You get obsessed about the history of
Civil War.
Okay, U.S. Civil War. You start going to U.S. Civil War recreations.
Yeah.
You get interested in. You can throw a dart at the map. Human rights tribunals following after the collapse of apartheid in South Africa. Anything. You start doing meaningful reading and meaningful writing and going to meaningful places, doing meaningful things, and you're going to meet women. You're going to meet members of the opposite sex or the same sex if that's what you're into, where there's some kind of meaningful spark. And also meeting people in advance over the internet. They're interested in you. You know what you have in common. And you know whether or not they're single or what their situation is. It's such a totally different thing. And like we mentioned this issue of owning a fancy car earlier. Whoops. I think the fancy car thing, I think it's like obsolete. You know what I mean? Fancy, if you want to drive fast, it's nothing wrong with, if you need a car to haul a boat, which I think some of these people do. I think some of these people, they need to buy an expensive car so they can tow their yacht. Exactly. That's why they need the expensive car. But an expensive car to meet women? And what kind of woman are you going to meet? I think there still are some women who will see an expensive car and get into bed with a guy straight off the sidewalk. Is that the kind of man you want to become? You want to become the man who chases those women? And even then, what does your perception of women become? Because there's this self-reinforcing, self-selecting loop. I wouldn't exactly call it misogyny, where that's the only kind of woman the only kind of women you interact with, and it's the only kind of woman you pursue, even if you aren't aware that that's what you're pursuing. That's a wrap. Based Zeus, I'm delighted that you're vegan, but we got nothing else in common.